8 years ago, my husband and I took our first trip together, driving 23 hours from Calgary to San Francisco. He was still in university and I had just started my first job out of college, so we really had to make the most of the drive and enjoying the sights we could see for free. 2023 marked our first 10 years together as a couple, and we've grown a lot in that time. So we wanted to celebrate by revisiting the city and enjoying a few more experiences we weren't fortunate enough to see last time. We called Napa home for the first 3 nights and stayed at this adorable resort called the RiverPointe. Muir Woods was definitely the highlight of our trip 8 years ago, so we couldn't wait to drive back. Little did we know the Dipsea Marathon was taking place that same morning, so it took us about 2 hours to wait for the runners and walk down, but it certainly made for a memorable morning. Traveling really is a gateway for inspiration in your everyday life. Being surrounded by nature in the vastness of the redwoods really made us appreciate fresh air and the time we spend together hiking back at home. Experiences we gain from seeing the world help to shape our outlook on life and better understand who we truly are when we are removed from our everyday environments. Allowing yourself to be swept up in the magic of somewhere new is also a great way to evaluate what you want out of life and what you may be missing in your regular routine. When traveling, I try to be mindful about how I'm feeling in each new setting and make mental notes about how I could incorporate certain elements back into my life at home. Time in nature is such a vital part of the human experience, and touring Muir Woods gave us lots of inspiration for our future backyard remodel and even how we could better incorporate more plants into our home. Our last trip to California, I was 20 and not able to legally drink. Not that it would have mattered much, the only wine I enjoyed back then was a sweet Moscato. Shane and I have since expanded our taste for wine and thought it would be a memorable experience to take a private winery tour. Throughout the afternoon, we reflected on our last decade together, the transition from our 20s into our 30s, from dating into married life, and knowing that if we make the trip in another 10 years, there will likely be little ones by our sides. We've changed a lot in the past 10 years, and though the ache of getting older definitely hits harder the closer I've gotten to 30, I'm in a place now where I know myself so much better than I did in the past. While your 20s are fun, it's generally a time of self-discovery, meeting new people and trying new experiences, and just learning to live life on your own. I personally feel there's something to be said for the next chapter of life when you know who you are, what you stand for, and being able to live more intentionally aligned with your greater vision for life. After Napa, we spent the remainder of our trip in San Francisco, staying in the heart of Union Square. This made it so accessible to take the cable cars to all the popular tourist spots and saved us from walking up the massive inclines throughout the city. Being from a landlocked province, it's no surprise we tried to take in a view of the water each chance we got. While Fisherman's Warf is great to see the sea lions and take in a magic show, it's not particularly where I would recommend souvenir shopping. I've come to the conclusion in my own home that I don't love to display mementos from my travels in such a literal sense. And if I had to guess, most people don't love to receive them either. I find so much more value in capturing pictures to display or creating videos like this to share with our loved ones. A highlight from our trip was actually the Ferry Building as opposed to Fisherman's Wharf. We found it to be less touristy with lots of great food options and of course the best fresh oysters at the Hog Island Oyster Bar. We actually ate here twice on the trip and visited the Ferry Building 3 times during our stay. I cannot recommend it enough. I mean, just look at how delicious these oysters were. Artisan markets are my go-to for souvenir shopping. You can always find something unique or handmade that doesn't feel as literal as a typical t-shirt or mug. My favorite souvenirs are things like blankets, pottery, or jewelry. It doesn't have to say San Francisco on it for me to remember where it came from, and I enjoy the items I've collected more this way when it's pieces I can actually mix into my home decor or everyday wardrobe. For smaller gifts, you cannot go wrong with handmade soap, framed postcards, or vases from a local potter. I simply cannot get through the rest of this vlog without giving a shout out to Sotomar. This was my favorite restaurant the entire trip. We ate fresh crab and shared a bottle of Chianti sitting on the street. It honestly was such an authentic experience. And the Cioppino will forever take up a spot in my list of top 5 favorite dishes. I could have eaten this meal every night we were in town. It was that good. In my opinion, one of the best ways to spend a day in the city is by visiting Golden Gate Park. We enjoyed renting a pedal boat so much on our last trip, so we had to do it again on this trip. Just like visiting the redwoods, I think it's so important to mix in nature throughout a vacation. At this point, we had spent about 3 days downtown San Francisco, so it was much needed to see some wildlife, smell the fresh flowers blooming, and just sit outside in the sun together. Experiences like this are often what you remember most from a trip, so we really took our time and savored the moment. We purchased a pass that allowed us to visit the Flower Conservatory, the Japanese tea gardens, and the botanical gardens. We love spending time in nature back at home, and seeing so many new plant species really made it fun to think about where we want to travel next. Again, such a nice break to stop and smell the roses after spending so much time in downtown. We stumbled across the SkyStar wheel on our way through the park. I believe it's only in town for a limited time, so we wanted to take it in while we had the chance. These were some of the best views of the park and the surrounding city area. The tea gardens were fabulous as always. If you decide to pay for just one area of the park to visit, this would be my recommendation. It's so pristinely kept, and the walking paths are so charming with all the uneven stones. There's lots of tall trees and grasses, the sounds of birds mixed with the flowing water, and the breeze really do make this the most peaceful spot in the park. There's so many unique plants and flowers that make this the perfect backdrop for photos. We were actually stopped by several other couples to take pictures of them along the paths. It was a really fun experience to stop and chat with other fellow tourists visiting the city. We then paid homage to the tea gardens by going out for sushi and matcha cheesecake at Elephant Sushi. Honestly, the best cheesecake I have ever had. I am going to have to find a place that sells this back in Calgary. Our favorite day of the whole trip was actually spent visiting Sausalito, for which we needed to head back down to the Ferry Building. This was the last day of our 3-day cable car pass, so we savored the views as we passed up and down the line. Being back at the Ferry Building was the perfect excuse to curate our breakfast from the various food stands. I had Red Bay coffee, and we each had a bagel from the Daily Driver. The bagels are so fresh, and it was nice to pick all of my favorite toppings. Absolutely the best way to spend a morning. And Shane couldn't resist second breakfast. He had been eyeing up the empanadas at El Portino every time we visited the Ferry Building. So you can imagine his excitement eating this next to the water. The ferry to Sausalito offers some of the best views of both the Bay Bridge, Golden Gate Bridge, and the skyline. Though we didn't see any whales, we were told by a couple locals that they're very common in the area. Sausalito is a quaint town with lots of little shops, art galleries, and restaurants. We had a lot of fun sampling various cocktails and walking along the ocean. There were also lots of boutiques, which was nice to do a little shopping along the way. It's also a great spot if you want to see crabs up close. And of course, on the way home, we stopped back at the Ferry Building for some more oysters from the Hog Island Oyster Bar. Not only do I love to thrift at home, but I never miss an opportunity to thrift in a new city. These are some of the best items I found while shopping in the Mission District. Thrifting has really helped me to find my personal style in both my home and wardrobe. When you don't know what you're going to find, it really forces you to evaluate a piece before you purchase it. I just find it to be a much more intentional way to shop, and because the cost is much lower than buying new, it takes away the pressure if it doesn't work out and you need to resell an item. This process has also helped me step out of my comfort zone with fashion. I get so many compliments when I wear a cool new vintage piece, and it just adds so much character to an outfit that you can't buy from a box store. I would also recommend thrifting for souvenirs. You can almost always find vintage mugs, hats, or sweaters that will have way more charm and thought behind them. Traveling really is a metaphor for life. While we have an idea of our destination, the memorable moments are made along the journey. This curation of experiences allows us to cultivate a sense of fulfillment and develop a richer understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Whether we are exploring new places or navigating life in general, both traveling and daily life calls us to embrace the journey with an open mind, savor the present moment, and curate a collection of experiences that make life meaningful and worthwhile.